Hello, everybody. It's 5 p.m., so we'll start our session for today. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Razan Jujaki from Society of Engineers, and I will be your host. Welcome to today's webinar, COVID-19's Impact on the Construction Project. This webinar is in aligned with Society of Engineers' goals and objectives to help the engineers to progress, especially in this current situation and for the future. So before we begin, I would like to mention that if you have any questions, kindly type them in the Q&A section that you will find. And we will be happy to answer all of your questions at the end of the session. Now, for those who've already sent out their questions, most of your questions will be covered in today's presentation. However, there are some details or points that cannot be discussed in detail due to time limitations. Now, without further ado, let me introduce our panelists for today. Engineer Hayat Mansour. Engineer Hayat is a program control manager with over 20 years of experience in the field of construction management, facility and maintenance management, controlling and planning, and much more. She has a solid experience in high-profile projects such as Time Tower, Nuri Island, and much more projects. Of volunteers, she is the director of volunteers in Khariji, in PMI Khariji chapter board members. In addition, she has been working as a certified trainer in Society of Engineers since 2007. Engineer Hayat, thank you very much for joining us today. We're really happy to have you. I know everybody has been anticipating today's webinar. So without any further delay, I will hand it over to you, and I will join you later on at the end of the session for the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Razan, and thank you for this introduction. Really appreciate. Good evening, all. Actually, with the Society of Engineers, we just decided to have something really related to what happened in these days. And we are facing something we didn't face before, we didn't meet in our project, even we didn't consider in our contract and in most business. Let me just share the presentation with you, and we'll start talking about the COVID-19 and how it's impact our project. Most of us working in construction field, and I mean the people who are attending the webinar today. So what the COVID-19 meaning and how it's can affect our project. Of course, it's especially for construction, it's not clear that the COVID-19 can consider as directly affect. For some projects, it has very impacted, but for other projects, it's with little impacted. Anyway, let's just consider from the first that this will be differ from project to another project, and from the type of projects, it's not the same. Most of the people will consider, first of all, the COVID-19, if this, as we heard, all of us know, the organization, the World Health Organization, defined coronavirus or the COVID-19 as pandemic. In this time, we start dealing with it as a crisis or as a disease, and most of the countries, or if not all the countries, consider like this is a really risk, and they start closing and lock down all the air freight, and there is a lot of lockdown area, if not in all countries or over world, it's in most of the world. This may be not touch the construction project directly, because most of the projects keep going, but because we are dealing with people, with material, equipment, and especially for the projects which has some supply chain, and the material come from exterior, so this got affected directly to the project. In this time, we got or we start consider COVID-19. It's part of the force majeure, but before we start to consider it as force majeure, and as we said, it will be different from project to another project or from business to another kind of business. Let's see what the meaning of force majeure and the type of force majeure, and if we can apply it in our construction projects or no. So, what the meaning of force majeure? I will consider FIDIC because FIDIC is mostly used in UAE. In addition, by the end, you can just mention some from UAE civil and how we can dispute and go to claim if this not mentioned or returned or referred to FIDIC. But by the in the first, let has idea about the force majeure in FIDIC. Actually, in FIDIC, it's in FIDIC 1999, clause 19, you will see the force majeure should explain as any exceptional event or circumstance which not beyond to party control, so no one can control the event when it will happen. Such party could not reasonably have provided against before entering into the contra. So mostly it will not be in the contra, and no one from the party will have the reason to provide it in the contra, and it will not be even considered in the risk assessment when you will start prepare for your project. Having a reason, such party could not reasonably have avoided or overcome. So it's happened, and most of the time we consider like it's acts of God or something like it's not in our hand, so something we cannot avoid, not substantially attribute to the other party. So we cannot consider like we can claim or something clear to request or claim time or cost. So this is generally what we consider the definition of the force majeure. The photo here, it just showed the some of the force majeure. It's like it cannot be excusing to don't have a homework or some kind of work, and this is what we will face when we will start consider the construction project, because we cannot apply it, as we will see now, in all force majeure in all construction work. So the force majeure in general, it can be like war, earthquake, tornado, volcano, or any flooding, fire. And the fire, it should be the biggest fire, which cannot be controlled and cannot be even covered by insurance. Something like revolution or some kind of civil war. Sometimes we can consider like some person risk, like the terrorism or some explosion. So there is a lot of force majeure event, and mostly if you look to that, it's considered like natural happened, or sometimes it's, if we consider the war and the revolution and such kind, it will be also not in the control of the contractor person. So if this really considered as, I mean, if in your contra you find that you mention directly the force majeure and you can rely on it, so you can just go directly to apply as what mentioned in FIDIC. I will mention the FIDIC here, the FIDIC clause here, because it's very important. So any kind of work, any kind of contra or business contra, not even not only construction contra, if you find that the force majeure which I consider here, it's applied to your contra, And before I go forward, I will tell you that in many countries they consider COVID-19 is part from the force majeure, and especially when your work or your project got affected directly. And for example, when we obligate to sit at home, no work, when the material stop delivering and got affected directly, all of this, it's become affected or impacted directly from COVID-19 as force majeure. We can consider it here as force majeure. But how I can, it's not the main problem here, and why we decide to raise this topic, because I heard from many contractors and many construction company that, okay, I will consider all the delay which happened to me as in COVID-19 as a force majeure, and I will get extension of time, I will get money, I will get like variation. But it's not the situation. It's not, if you decide that this is considered as force majeure, that's mean the client or the engineer will accept with you and will and you can just go ahead and wait till the COVID-19 will finish, you will raise your extension of time. It's not in this way. And this is the main reason for today webinar. I need from you just to take these points serious and make sure you have it from now, or if you forget to do it before, because after that, if you will not send notice, if you forget to mention all of the point which we will consider now, either you will either the client or the contractor, the employee will accept from you to consider this is as a force majeure, or no, you need to send the notice, you need to consider and assess all the point which we will consider it now, because this will be the first step for you to protect your work and to avoid any delay or any frustration after. So let's start after we define the force majeure and we said, okay, we'll consider COVID-19 in general as force majeure. Then after we can study our contract. But let's see what the meaning of force majeure in the construction and how we can start considering that. First of all, in clause 19.2, and this is the more important point, it's notice of force majeure. Always, even before we enter to force majeure, remember, if there is any risk arise in your project, it's required from you, as you know, to send a letter and to notify the employee, the engineer, notify, if you are the subcontractor, notify the main contractor and let him know about um, the risk and the problem which happened. So before I go inside this one, consider what we will mention here. It can apply to both the force majeure and the emergency conditions. The different, we will mention it here in details, but in general, even if you will not consider the COVID-19 as force majeure, we can consider it as emergency conditions happen, but I still need to have or complete all the steps which I will mention here. So if both parties prevented from performing any obligation mentioned in the contract, as you know, always in the contract there is obligations in addition to the terms and the clauses. So if this risk or this arisen event will event or prevent the both party or one from the party to perform his work and go forward for the contra, especially by force majeure, should give a notice to other party, and this notice should be within 14 days. And the notice, you will mention there the force majeure as event, for example, now as COVID-19. So we will mention that because of COVID-19, and it's not enough, you need to specify what exactly is the obligation and the performance which got affected. So what you cannot do, for example, if I get affected because the material cannot reach my project, so I will mention here the delay. The main delay will be from the material, delay in material. If the lockdown itself avoid me from going from, for example, emirate to another emirate, so I can also mention that in the letter and send it. It's not necessary now to provide all the information and consider it like final, but you need to send this notice, mention at least what you know now as the more important items. It cannot be done in your project, and mention the reason as a force major event. This, as we say, the notice should be within 14 days after you aware or you become aware about this risk. Um, it's not applied to obligation of either party to make payments to the other party under the contract. So even if we decide that this, for example, will delay us, and it will request from us to have more, for example, the manpower, it's not allowed to be in the same population in the site, and we need to have like double shift, something like this. So maybe I consider this will cost me a lot of money, because I plan to finish the project in this time, but now I need the subcontractor to work with me more time. Just remember, even if you mention all the cost and all the impact in your notice and what you will send to engineer, especially in the force majeure, there is nothing can obligate the other party to pay. Usually, even if we will go to the court, it will be like depend in the court, like decide by the end, but most of the time the force majeure will not have a cost impact. It can be mostly they will calculate the time, but they cannot obligate the other person or the client to pay for that, except it's depend, of course, between project to another project, between contract to another contract. Sometimes the force majeure itself, it's related to some increase in material price. If you have proof, and in the first of few contract you have the BOQ with the price, as if you remember in 2008, when the crisis happened and all people come to claim and raise the dispute about the difference in lot of material price. In this time, what the court requests from most of the contractor is to include the BOQ with pricing BOQ in the contra, in the building materials contra itself, because they said in case if you include that and you prove that the material will increase, they can obligate at least the two parties to share the increasing of the material, so no one will be losing in this way. So just make sure to read the contra, understand what include in your contra, then you can consider that maybe I can get some payment, but I need to send, and the more important here, to send notice with specify the obligation and the performance in this notice, of course, with the force majeure event. The clause 19.3, it's the duty to minimize the delay. What we are considering here is most of the time, and as we all know about the construction projects, most of the projects it's delay, even COVID-19 happened, and it's written, and if not in a letter between the client or the engineer and the contractor. It will be in the monthly report or the bi-weekly report. It's mentioned how many days delay, such delay happened because of this reason. So the force majeure will not cover this delay, and just we need to specify here and be sure when we will mentioned the delay due to the force majeure, we are not considered more than what the force this event or the force majeure consider, or what happened and how many days delay reason by the event. So the more important here is what we can do as a profession is we can just still consider that we are obligating to minimize the delay as much as we can. We should try our all our plans to reduce. For example, if we can, like we said, we have 2 shifts, we can just do it. If we can consider like material will instead of waiting material from outside, if not yet put the PO, so we can try to find another source from internal and from the country. So it's very important to consider how and discuss with the other party about how we can minimize the delay. Maybe sometimes we can just tell the other party if the delay is too much and the lockdown continue for more than what we can consider for especially for the short time projects. So we can just discuss with the other party and tell him that we need some more like helping, or we need some changing even in the conditions. Sometimes it's happened, and we can just request to change some clause in the contract or some conditions in the contract just to make the contract valid and continue working. And it's your obligation to inform and notice the other party when no longer affected by corona by force majeure. So we need to notice them in the first when we discover the event, and we need to send a notice that this is stop, it's not anymore impact my project, and the total result it's this one. So we will mention that to the employee or the engineer. What are the consequence we need to do of force majeure event? So it's like the summary, and there is many clauses we can visit in FIDIC to cover the whole force majeure and how we can protect ourselves. So and also for our rights. If the contractor is prevented from performing his obligation, as we mentioned before, because of the force majeure, we have to notice the other party as per clause 19.2, which we mentioned previously. If suffering, delay, and cost by reason of such force majeure, contractor subjected to claim under clause 20.1. So after you visit your contract and you see that you have the right and you are suffering from delay, so you have the right to for extension of time or for any variation, you can just visit the clause 20.1 and submit your claim. Don't forget that in this claim you need to attach your notice, and you need to attach all your proof. In some countries now they start getting some certificates. It's called like force majeure certificates, and they attach that, but of course to get it they need some proof document, like for example if they are working in material supply, so they provide some letter from exporting companies from, for example, manufacturing in China or in different countries, and even if the material it's stopped in any border, they provide or they bring signed certified document from the border that or from the logistic company that this material it's stopped there for like 2-3 weeks or more according to the place in which country. This will help to submit your document, so this will avoid you from any penalty. This will for example, according to your contract, you can just submit it and get the extension of time. We have some you can just read 20.1 clearly, and you will see how we can have the full claim and submit it. So this will be accepted. Don't forget the proof documents and the assisted document. Highlight any claim for extension of time for such delay if completion delayed under clause 8.4. All the extension of time for completion we need to mention under clause 8.4. Also, it's very important to have all the documents there and study how this impact our time. And of course, if you are in a project, you know, usually we are referring to approved baseline schedule, and when we have any of the delay affect the this baseline, we can just study that and see how many days this got affected. Maybe it's not, like for example, if we consider the work in our construction project, it's not totally 100% stop, but it's, for example, it's low around 50%, 35%, like this. So we can consider this and calculate the impact and submit that to request the extension of time, and you can just submit it in any method as you know. The circumstance of kind defined in clause 19.1, which we defined before to understand the definition and to introduce that to the client or the engineer, just to prove that what we are facing here, it's considered as force majeure. Depending on the country you are working in, you can also have something, we call it as legislation, or there is a lot of countries has some, what we call it is like adjustment in the rules or adjustment for changes in legislation. For some country it's happened, and this also affect our work, and you can use it in your force majeure also. It's sometimes, if this will affect a lot, it's sometimes obligate the even the employee or the client to terminate the work if the contractor consider, like according to the new rules or the authorization which requested now, he cannot load it more, and he cannot even take this risk on him. For example, as we receive some questions about most of the labor, he's supposed to bring it from outside, and now he discovered that and he mentioned that his manpower, it's not from UAE, it will come from India or from Pakistan or even different countries as expert or some kind of people, and it's mentioned clearly in the contract. Then the lockdown happened, so he can just go to the client and consider the rule which happened in the country as lockdown and stop the flying, and he can request to changing in the contra accordingly. This will help, but we need to make sure all of this mentioned in your contra, or you have the refer. This what we are considering, the clause 8.5 and the clause 13.7, which we can consider when something happened in the country and obligate us to delay, if not totally stop the project. Receiving this notice, engineer proceed in accordance clause 3.5 to determine what will happen after. So even it's not affecting only the main contractor, it's affecting even the subcontractor. So if any subcontractor is entitled under any contra or agreement related to work to relieve from force majeure on terms additionally to or broader than those specified in this clause. In different words, we can say the subcontractor has the same right as the main contractor to submit his notice and to he has the right to claim, and of course he still need to make sure he will mitigate all the delay, and if he find that he can for some items he cannot avoid it, he can just submit his notice and mentioned all the obligation which he cannot proceed. There is another clause very important in FIDIC, it's 19.6, the optional. It's all the notice will come now to the engineer, and he can determine if he will terminate or he will pay the contractor or release them from some obligation. So just I noticed I just mentioned here because it's very important that when I have the time as contractor, not to, I don't want to wait the client to terminate me. I can have, I have the right to terminate the contract if for a continuous period of 84 days it's preventing the work. I cannot do the work because of the force majeure for continuous 84 days, or if this not continuous but in multiple periods, but totally 140 days. The engineer will have 7 days after I notice him, and after that he can decide to terminate. And even if he decide also that all the load which we sent to him, as we cannot consider because of the force majeure, he can just check and he can decide to proceed with the termination or stopping some work, if not all, and ask the contractor to remove all the equipment from the site. Just make sure that you send notice, or if the engineer will do that, he should send notice. And of course, he should calculate all of this and take it in his calculation. It's not only to terminate and ask you to go from the site. There is a lot of things he should consider in his determine as value. The amount payable for any work, it should calculate and price it according to the contra, and you should get it. If, for example, if I submit like before the COVID-19, there is like 20% already done, but I got paid just 10%, and I have the document, I can submit it, and this amount should be paid by the engineer, by the client. Cost of plant material delivered to the contractor. Also, it's even if we decide to stop the work and terminate the contra, and we deliver some material to the site, we need to evaluate the material and plant, the equipment, everything we have in the site. If we cannot use it, and we decide that this is related only to this project, the employee should pay for that. Any other cost of liability incurred by contractor in the expectation of completing of the work, this will be considered from both parties. So as we consider that there is some a percentage we already done and we need to pay, if there is any delay from the contractor side, the engineer will calculate it also, and if there is any liability, he can consider it, calculated, and deducted from the contractor. Cost of removal of temporary works and contractors' equipment from site, it's the contractor right to have it, as you can consider it or define that in your document as demobilization from the site, and this is your right to have it. The cost of reparation of the contractor staff and labor employee fully in connection with the works at the date of termination. So everything you have until today, if you have like labor wages, if you have any stuff you still paying for until the employee terminate you, you should get it, and this is from the right of the contractor. So if any of this event considered as force majeure, just remember both parties should contractually submit all the obligations, and if they cannot find the solution through the contract directly or through the discussion and the submit of the document, maybe they need to refer to the law. And usually it's mentioned in the contract. For example, here in UAE, in many contra we refer that we will refer to UAE law. So this is also very important. Check if this mentioned, or because if not mentioned in the contract, that means this need a court, and this should submit to the like dispute. It will not be solving as normal claim. Okay. So both parties should work together and prepare all the document, and then decide the right for each one and release all the obligations from both sides. You can check after. I just mentioned the more important clauses in FIDIC, so you can just go through it, because this clause also it's very important. Clause 20.1, if you decide to prepare claim after the notice, you will prepare claim, and you want to mention all of the proof in this claim. So this the whole sequence, how you can send this not only for force majeure. You can consider it even if you can, if this is emergency condition, like if the client tell you that COVID-19 for him it's not a force majeure, okay, but there is emergency happened and I need to claim. For this claim, I will take I need to notice them, and in 28 days you need to send this notice. Then the contractor will prepare all the records and put it in this claim. This report should have after ending of the event, and the whole records, and it's a stop, it's not continuing yet now. So you need to submit the whole interim with all the proof, with the monthly interval. You need to mention all the claims which you have. If you have any impact from delay material, such like document, you need also to mention it here. If your labor got impact by sick labor or closed some some sites got closed for 14 days at least when they discover some COVID-19 person impacted there. So they closed the whole site for 14 days. This also we can consider it in our force majeure or in our claim when we will submit the claim document. So this is very important. And remember, the interim you need to submit within 42 days after receiving, within 28 days after after considering that the effect of the event is stopped. Then the client should reply to you within 28 days and maximum within 42 days after receive a claim or supporting previous claim within period proposed by engineer and approved by the contractor, you will receive the reply. So this is very important. Please double check that in FIDIC because it's very clear, and make sure to have all the document there. So as we said, in most of the business, COVID-19 considered as force majeure, but unfortunately, for construction project, not in all contra consider as force majeure. It's maybe partially we can consider it, but not at all. So how we can determine that? We need to study the contra. This differ from project to another project and even from country to another country. If you are working in a local project or your project it's in different country, how the impact will happen. So you need to study that and you need to make sure that you have all the information. Then you can determine if you have the right and the obligations, if your obligations got impacted by COVID-19. In most of the time, we can consider partially, but it's need to study your contra to see what mentioned there, what the obligation you have, if the force majeure it's mentioned clearly or no. If I consider UAE law or I need to go to court. So this is depend to the contra itself, but usually you can find at least you can consider emergency and you can raise or claim at least for extension of time. So this in general what we talk about it, and the more important here we can consider what caused delay for our construction project. It's the supply chain and how this stop when come from country to another country. It's also depend in the manpower itself, because sometimes some work it's continue working, but as per the government law and some of the new rules come, we cannot, for example, for the transportation, it's become very difficult to transfer a lot of manpower together. So this become more costly. You can prepare such of this, especially if the transportation mentioned in your contract, so you can claim for that. If your contra is only lump sum, you will face more problem, because in lump sum it's just obligation to reach the goal and have all the work done, and sometimes it's not mentioned in details, and most of the contractor didn't provide even a detailed bill of quantity with cost. So this makes some obstacles also for them when they will try to claim for additional cost, and especially if the material will change, because there is no proof to show the client that this material increased because of the lockdown, because of the additional transportation, and or even the for in some border we are paying for the land where we put the material, and we are waiting, we put the container and we are waiting till the border will open. So this has additional cost. But anyway, you still can try, and if you can find the proof for all of this additional cost, you can add it, and this will help to claim for extension of time and cost. So the force majeure, this only like a summary. The establishing the force majeure event, it can be by the end determined by the engineer to terminate the contract, refrain from performing the contract in some case, suspend performance of the contract, or claim for extension of time for the performance. This will be according to the documents which we will provide and according to the type of the contract. This is the main impact happen to the engineer and the construction. So claim due to delays and cost overrun, because we know now we are paying more cost, and we will delay because the shortage in manpower will impact the performance itself, and supply chain disruptions, and also this the manpower and the supply chain got impacted. So for reason how coronavirus impact construction business, as we said, the supply chain will delay materials and delay the job. Definitely, the quarantine of people will impact ability for contractors to do the work. If not 100%, you can consider the percentage which you got impacted. If they said it's not totally impact your construction work, even if we'll not consider it as force majeure, but you still can consider it in this way. Calculate the percentage which you got impacted and apply it in your manpower evaluation, which you consider when you evaluate and submit your cost. Wider economic and market challenge will affect housing market and construction spending. This will affect also, and this challenge will affect your construction. Legal dispute and protections will pinch payment speeds. This also because it's not for one, it's not impact one side, it's impact the whole people in the country. So for that, all the people will get effect in the payment, and this what we mentioned here, and we need to make sure it will not, make sure that you always notice your payment, if this will delay, if this will impact your payment speed, so you need to take more action. Checklist for contractor to survive. So this is something we need to do to just save ourselves and be prepared if we need to submit after any document, or if we need to protect ourselves. So inventory and address immediate legal issues. So when you have in your inventory any problem or any delay in your material, because the material will come from different place, you are paying for different things, you don't consider it in the first because it was not there before coronavirus. So just mention it and keep it address. Create something called issue log. It's very important. And now the procurement log will be very important for you, even if before you ignore it. Get strict about protecting lien rights. Monitor your general contractor's payment, behavior changes, change job to avoid someone else from tanking your business. So just make sure how you are paying the people and how the people study all the document which come to you, and make sure how you are paying even, and how the behavior of the other parties who are working under you. Increase your cash cushion, and this will be through a lot of ways, like for example, sometimes from the bank, we can even contact the bank and request to delay the payment, especially if you are usually dealing with the bank. They can help and find another solution. This is one way. The other way, it's to find another way of, like for example, sometimes we have bonding or some uh, like some buffer with the client, and we can come and request from him if we can use it in this time. Also, there is some retainage. Maybe we can request from the client to stop the retainage for this time, as helping for us to save some cash. We need to know for as COVID-19 in construction law, there is a lot, but mostly we cover it. And as we mentioned in FIDIC, the Red Book 1999, if this considered as COVID-19, sorry, if they consider the COVID-19 as force majeure, so we solve it. If this only delay us, so we can start preparing all the causing delay and request extension of time. If we have, and now we have the very like rigid or very a clear cause, and we can just raise it, so we can study with the employee and demonstrate to him the causing of delay very easy. If the delay happened because sometimes now the delay happened because of the payment from the engineer, we can also raise this issue and make it, because the cost now and crisis, it's in all of us, and we need to make sure we have enough money, or we can change the condition little and find another way to deal. So there is a lot of way, even if will not consider in construction or contractor work directly COVID-19 as force majeure. So just remember how to state that, and how we consider all of these circumstances, and use all the definition, all of this reason now to prepare your extension of time. And if you have any reason or any impact in your cost, also you can include it. This what mentioned who got affected or impacted more in COVID-19. They consider the construction material. It's in the low exposure, especially if this considered as local construction and materials. But we still can consider it's related to some supply chain and manufacturing, which they consider it here in the, if you see in the moderate exposure, so it's considered the manufacturing and this and steel producers, and this will impact directly the construction. There is many things, even like the automated manufacturing, some automotive suppliers, it's in the high exposure, even the global shipping. So if we need to consider the construction separately, or like one item only, we can consider it as low exposure, but in general it will be related to very high exposure and moderator even, which got impacted a lot from COVID-19. Okay, I will try to cover some of how to manage in this time, in this period, how we can manage the project cost and the schedule, because we are in crisis time. Just remember, because it's very important and very linked to the COVID-19 itself. So always remember to keep planning, understand all the situation, determine the impact, specify always the cause and the effect, and don't forget to always include the time and extra work if you have. It's very important to have reasonable plan who can be practiced, and it's exactly reflect the site situation. Don't forget to communicate always, and have be a decision maker, and prepare always the change request and all your claims. Don't forget to have all documents which will proof and support your claim ready, especially in this time. It's very important to have also and prepare the recovery and acceleration plan. As mentioned in many places in FIDI, that we need to still minimize the delay. We need to establish current forecast of completion. So it's not only request extension of time, we need to have clear forecasting end time. We need to identify the delay, what activity got impacted, and define all of this. And even if we have something will get affected in the future, we need to define it also. Assess the responsibility, who are responsible for the delay, if this is from our side or the client side, because after that they will request from us to submit and study if this is consumables or no, if there is any excuse for the delay or no, or we cannot submit it in our claim. Determine the resource plan, especially now. Look for plan B for your crews. Look for productivity data and be ready. Look at earned schedule and visited, so you can have solid background where is your problem, even in the earned value. Analyze your resources. Develop plan for anticipated lower efficiency. Always separate, as we said, prepare the issue, analyze it, and negotiate with the team. Find always the action to solve it. Execution of recovery plan, we need to prepare from like prior mitigation through execution of recovery plan. Prepare how we can recover the time and the costs, and find a solution for that. Always find a competition for material and resources. Okay, this is not very important because I think we are almost done, but it's important, but we already covered it before. When we speak about the issue, the risk, it's also we can consider as additional. We need to have it. It's very important in this crisis time to identify the risk, try to prepare all the action which we have. As you prepare issue log, we need to have risk assessment and put identify it, assess it, what is the threat, and how it can keep monitoring. It's very important. This what we, when we speak about the recovery plan and the risk assessment, it's part from something we call it as mitigation and acceleration needs. Just remember, as contractor, to mitigate the delays, and as owner, he will always request from you to accelerate your work. So we need to have a balance in between. So in this way, we will not lose our right, and we will not even shift everything to be in the client side. Run always the QC check on scheduling time. Look at out of sequence work because it's very important. Try to do fast tracking by increase the occurrency work, and try to compress some work and improve efficiency. This is very like normal work we can do just to regain the time and mitigate our risk. By the end, and this is the last thing I want to mention here, it's the collaboration. Just remember also, it's the collaboration, it's the key for all kind of work, especially in construction work. Determine and maintain always your project status, clean up the delays and the disruption, team embrace risk and mitigation. We need to have it. Work always with your team, manage your resource, care about the team, and deal with them as human. They will help you a lot, and trust that they can do the work. No, you should know you are working with who, and they support them, assist them, and they will be your supporting also in your work. Identify all the opportunity to shorten the schedule, review the productivity for improvement opportunity. Razan, I think I covered most of the point which we discussed before. I will stop the sharing, and we can, yeah, just 1 minute.
Okay, thank you very much for this informative presentation. Thank you very much. So we'll start now the Q&A session. Please, if you have any questions, type them just in the Q&A, because I wouldn't be able to answer the questions if they're in the chat. And we'll start. If there's a repetition in questions, we might not answer all of your questions if we find that there's a repetition, and if it's something unrelated for the panelists, for Engineer Hayat to answer. So we'll start with our first question. We have a question from Mr. Kamal Abdulrahman. He wrote his question in Arabic, but just excuse me, Mr. Kamal Abdulrahman, I'll translate it in English so that other people will benefit as well. What he said is that they have conducted a survey for the contractors, and Maud said that they were not highly affected from COVID-19. However, there's apprehension and fear for the delay of the supplies of materials from abroad if the shipment still does not open. So what are your comments and thoughts about this?
Actually, this point I already covered in the presentation when we discussed about the main item, and we said most of the construction project didn't get affected directly from COVID-19, but it's still like emergency condition happened and delay our work. For that, it's not like force majeure as much as it's like impact the movement, impact the shipment of the work. So as he said, if they refer to the delay in the shipment or the material, the contractor or his subcontractor can just submit to him the proof that this material stuck in the border with all the details, and this give them the right to extension of time.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we have another question from Mahmoud or Muhammad Amran. He said that the notice should be within 14 days for force majeure only, or if there is any other delay event or any other event.
Usually for the delay event or for the normal extension of time, we consider it's 14 days for the first notice, and 28 days to submit the interim, the detailed package.
Okay.
After the first notice.
Okay, thank you. So what okay, we have another question that says from an anonymous attendee. He says that if the required document, if there's like a required document of proof that there's a contract that was affected, from example, a delay of supply of materials. Like the contractor did not provide a document that proves that they were affected because there's a delay of supply of materials. Should they accept the requested notice period or no? What should they do?
If
As in,
they
I think
don't
it
have,
will.
if they don't have any document, they will not have the right to submit anything. For that, I told them from the first, it's depend from contra to another contra. Usually when we are trying to request for any extension of time, we need documents. But in different ways, sometimes, like especially now in COVID-19, we can use the government lockdown or the government rules as the reason. And if this really affected by the rules, like for example, when the government said it's total lockdown, or the government don't allow some labor from Sharjah to come to Dubai or something like this, if he can prove that even just from the UAE rule, we can consider it. But if he don't have any proof or any document or anything to rely to, we cannot consider.
Okay,
He
thank
will
you.
lose his right.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we have a question from Dominique. He says, does the engineer have to list all the force majors before sending the contract to be signed? Like what
All
are...
the force, all the force major event which impact his contract. It's not all in general.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. How contracts should proceed when client is not considering COVID-19 claims and do not want to pay for additional costs? How the contract should proceed if the client is not
This what
considering COVID?
this what we explain in the other half from our presentation when we discuss about the extension of time in general. So if you have proof that the material caused your delay or some shortage in your manpower caused your delay, and you have proof for that, you can submit it as claim, as extension of time, with all the documents to support your claim. So he should consider it like a emergency condition or additional claim you can request, but you need to submit all your proof and documents.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a question from Abner Rivera. He said, is the clause for change in legislation can be applied?
Yeah, of course. We mentioned that also. We said clause 13.7 is very important, and you need to have it in your documents when you study and you want to submit for force majeure or even for extension of time happened. As we said, no, it's if this due to adjustment in the country rule, if this delay because of some change rule in your country or any related countries, so you can also consider it. For that, I mentioned it also in the consequence.
Okay. So we have another question from Mr. Muhammad Hani. He says, if I have done, like he finished material delivery and I'm unable to attend the inspection due to lockdown in other Emirates, so how do I pass the work and get the money from the client and consultant?
Maybe virtual. I don't know.
Yeah.
He don't have any assistant there. I cannot answer this because it's a special situation.
Yeah.
See, I'm working with company and we are working like offshore, but in this case we have one QA in the site, and he is the one who check.
Okay.
But we cannot just ask them to pay if he's the one who will inspect. He need to wait this 1 week, and after that he can go there.
Okay, so it's a special question, depends on the circumstance, so it's not an open question.
Because
so
usually
Yeah.
even if you are sitting here in Dubai and the project in Al Ain, for example, or Abu Dhabi, you should
Yes.
have at least one assistant, or not all the people will be from Dubai or from Sharjah. Usually this what happened. And even if your project outside UAE, you will have some people there. who can do the work. At least they are assistant and they can help and attest.
Yeah.
I don't know if they will accept with him to have it like just virtually, but he will not have the correct measure
Mhm. Okay.
from camera and Zoom.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have one question from Jibaharan Selvan. I'm sorry if I did not pronounce your name correct. He says, can you please explain how to claim machinery ideal charges in this lockdown period?
Uh, we talk about material. We didn't speak about machinery, but usually the machinery, if this is now in the project and it's become idle, you can just consider it as I don't know exactly if his work is totally stopped or he's working just partial, and how much the idle equipment he has. So he need to assess that and consider it when he will submit the uh, like the request for additional cost or variance.
Okay. We have another question from Sathaya Parkash. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your names correctly. She says, or he says, how consultant shall be compensated due to COVID-19 delays and losses? The
How the
consultant,
consultant,
yeah,
what?
shall be compensated due to COVID-19 delays and losses.
We cannot think instead of him. So some employee or consultant, they understand the situation and they can even help you and support when you will submit the document. And for that, when we mentioned that if you submit all your document with support documents and you mention that this is your impact and he know that because he's in the same site with you, he can determine by the end. Some of them will determine to load all the delay in you because you don't have like solid proof. Some consultant will try to help you and will help you even to mitigate, and they will give you some extension of time. Most of them, as I know, most of the client will give you time, but they will not give you cost.
We have Zainab is asking, she wrote her question in Arabic. Sorry, Zainab, I'll translate it for the others to benefit. She says, is there a document for the construction that contains all the risks that you might find in the field of construction? A document with all the risks mentioned? I don't think so.
Most of the I cannot believe she can find all listed, but um, in FIDIC there is a lot. There is some. I cannot consider she can find it in one document or in construction document. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Hazim Tamtoon. He said, if a project has already impacted before COVID-19 started due to the poor performance of the contractor, such as shortage of manpower, productivity, no payment to subcontractor, etc., and then impacted further due to COVID-19, but concurrent to the contractor's delay, will there be any entitlement to contractor in this case?
This we mentioned also in the presentation, and we said uh, you still need to mitigate your delay. COVID-19 will not be responsible for the delay after. So what will happen, they will calculate that you are delaying before COVID-19, you are delaying, for example, 10%. This 10% will be there and it will not go from your performance, and you still need to recover it and submit recovery plan and try to solve your problem, as no one will accept to shift that to COVID-19.
Uh, so
I
we're
mean,
having,
the consultant will not accept from him. He still need to solve his problem, the main problem with him, and he know that. Okay,
yeah,
find a solution instead of just put that in the extension of time of COVID-19. He need to solve the first delay which he has, then he can request extension of time for what happened in COVID-19 time.
Okay, so we're still receiving a lot of questions. So hopefully we can cover most of them, if not all. Uh, Hopefully, please do not mention questions again that already have been mentioned in the presentation, but we'll try and cover as much as possible. Uh, we have a question from Mohammed Qasim. He's saying, does that mean COVID-19? That means COVID-19. We consider that does that mean that COVID-19 is being considered instead of the HSE assessment in future? And would it be risky to identify even when we do not go to the EOT?
It's totally different. And when we are talking now about COVID-19 assessment, it's like additional to what he has in HSE documents. It's totally additional.
Okay, we have a question from Mujahid. He says, what about productivity loss due to COVID-19 guidelines by government impacting movement, social distancing, etc.?
Yeah, you need to consider all. This what we said. If you have like in many projects they consider the transportation and even the additional manpower they want to use. Like they don't consider a night shift before, but now according to the to the rule, it's mentioned there, or the opposite. We consider that with night shift we can finish the project in 6 months, but now through the lockdown it's not allowed to work after 7, for example, so we need to stop working early. This also he can consider. All the rule we can consider it as per clause 13.7.
Okay, we have another question. Says, how as a consultant can we convince the client about COVID-19 being a force major? How can we convince them?
As consultant,
Yeah, they're a
he's
consultant.
he's the one who can explain that to the client, because he's the client representative. But he need to know that if this really COVID, if this really impact as a force majeure in his project or no. So he need to make sure that the work how many days lockdown totally, how many what the really impact happened in your project calculated, then he can present to the client. It's his first responsibility to evaluate the risk first, then he can tell him about it.
Munawar is asking if the delivery of a product shipment from outside the UAE was already delayed, which delayed the project completion initially. Later, when the COVID-19 outbreak happened, the delivery was subsequently delayed for another 15 days due to delay in the shipment. Can extension of time be claimed under force majeure clause? And in the contract, there is a particular clause which says contractor is not entitled to claim any additional cost due to force majeure.
Oops. So
Mm,
they close it.
yeah, yeah.
It's answered, but she still can consider not the force majeure. She still can consider uh, like additional extension of time due to emergency condition. It's not force majeure. She don't mention as a force majeure, but prepare claim and submit it. It's trial. Submitted as extension of time with all the document. Bring the paper attested and just submitted that this is hold for 15 days in the border, and this will help a lot. Usually, most of the client will understand and will give you extension of time. But another thing, this item should be in your critical path. If this not in your critical path, that's mean the delay will not impact your schedule.
Hopefully this will work, so try it out. I think, thank you for your recommendations.
Usually,
Okay.
usually this what we are doing. We are checking if the item it's in the critical path. So we have the right to check if the material which here in this line will delay. That means the whole project will delay. We have the right to submit extension of time, claim for extension of time.
Okay, we have another question. Can the contractor demobilize from site due to COVID-19 after sending a notice?
No, no, no. He need to wait for 84 days if he got impacted for 84 days, or he should pay the penalty of uh, like breach the contract. The notice will not be enough. For that, we mentioned, I mentioned one clause. It's that about the termination of the contract.
We're receiving a lot of similar questions. One,
Can I propose something?
yes.
If these questions it's similar to
Mm-hmm.
what you are doing here, can you create like WhatsApp group and post all the questions and I can answer, or you almost done?
There's a lot of questions, but I think this is we're over the time. I know that
Because
because
I
this.
feel tired.
Okay, so what we're going to do is now we almost covered like most of the questions, and some of the questions are repetition. So
Mm,
whoever is typing in their questions, email us and
okay.
give us, like, for example, your mobile number and email. In the email, write for me, I am blah blah, your name. This is my mobile number. This is my question. We can either reply to you an email, or we can create a WhatsApp group with Engineer Hayat, and then she can reply to your inquiries through WhatsApp or through emails. We will discuss what's the better track to go on. So we're really sorry if we could not cover all of your questions, but you do understand that it's now 6:20, and I think Engineer Hayat is tired. So
Um,
we
yeah,
apologize.
I'm ready. I'm ready to answer. But as you said, we almost finished all the questions, and I feel it's repeated, and most of that it's already covered in the presentation. What I propose, if anyone want more details, or he want to ask different question, like you said, let him just send it to your email. And just a reminder that in contractor. As you notice, even in your question, Razan, there is a lot of
Yes,
people who mentioned that we don't accept force majeure in our contra or like this. So just be remind that it will be different from contra to contra, from condition to another condition. Some projects stopped, another project didn't stop working. Some projects got impacted because it's got
true,
labor from another Emirates, or material from different place. So we need to study the situation, or we cannot know how to prepare the
true.
claim.
True.
Okay,
Thank you very much. Thank you for being
you're
here, and
most
thank you
welcome.
for such an informative presentation. And thank you all our attendees for joining us and being here. I just want to mention before ending this that next week we're going to have another free webinar on Wednesday with Dr. Fadi. It's about strategic management in engineering and construction firms. We'll be discussing live case studies from the UAE and what CEOs in the UAE are saying are the best strategies to follow during and post COVID 19. So ensure you do not miss out our webinar next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Now, if you have any further comments or suggestions, or do you want additional sessions like the one that we had today about the construction and the COVID-19 impact in the construction project, please email it to us or contact us. We at the Society of Engineers are always happy to hear from you, and we'll try and do another session. So just please, the people who have asked questions and we could not answer them today, please email us your questions, and we'll try to, as much as possible, answer them. And if you have any suggestion, or you need, or you feel that you want another session similar to this one, just email us and we will try and figure out something. At the end, thank you again, all. Thank you all for joining us today, and hope to see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Have a lovely evening. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you, Razan. Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Bye bye.